Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to the Midday magazine. My name's Burhan, and I'm your host for today. And we will today be talking about Muslim professional networking, mentoring, what life is like for Muslims in the workplace. We'll be exploring non-traditional, if you like, careers for Muslims. You may have seen on the poster, it says, do all Muslims have to become doctors and accountants? That was slightly tongue-in-cheek. And so we want to explore that, and we want to see, what are the other legitimate careers, which in summary, in the spoiler alert, it's all of them, and what it would be like for people in the workplace and how we can help each other. And my guest today, I'd like to introduce Marwa Farouk, Abdul Basit Malik, who are both from the Consortium Network, and Sayed Rahim, who's from the Cube Network. Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Walaikum assalam.
Walaikum assalam.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. And maybe I'll start with Marwa. We're going to start off talking about a little bit about mentoring. It sounds it can sound a little bit tedious, mentoring. People tend to think, well, why do I need to have a mentor? I can really work this out for myself. I can watch some YouTube videos. What do you think the value of mentoring is, generally speaking, in the workplace, and how can it assist the Muslim community specifically?
I think actually mentoring is a huge opportunity for professionals. Mentoring is, what stands out with mentoring is tailored support. This is a relationship that you're building with another professional, most of the time more experienced than you, that is offering you specific, tailored, customized support. And especially in the context of Muslims, this is an opportunity to leverage other people's experiences in the workplace, being Muslims.
Okay. And is there a gap in that for Muslims at the moment? Is there a particular reluctance within the Muslim community, or is there a disconnect with current mentoring things that we find a need for a Muslim mentoring network?
I think there is a need that we have a lot of Muslim professionals, especially young Muslim professionals, that are entering the workplace, are facing the barriers that any minority would face, or any community of people would face in the workplace. Things like unconscious bias, difficulties with progressing with their careers, dominant ways of working. And the opportunity with mentorship is that now, as a young professional, you're paired with someone who is more senior than you, who has gone through some of these challenges and now has strategies and tools to navigate these dynamics in the workplace, and then they can transfer that knowledge to you. So you don't have to go, you can be facing these challenges in a more skilled and aware approach.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, and that's a very nice introduction. I think that sets the scene very nicely as to what our discussion is going to be over the next 45, 50 minutes. And if you'd like to join that discussion, you can give us a call. You can text us or WhatsApp us or phone in and join us in the studio live. The number is 077 614 60614, 077 614 60614. And you can either join us through text and WhatsApp, or you can just follow along. We are live streaming on Facebook and YouTube and on ramadanradio.org. Just to turn to Abdul Basit for a second. Within most large companies, or even the smaller ones, they have some kind of mentorship program. They have sort of buddy schemes and this kind of thing, professional development. Is there a need, therefore, to have something on top of that, which is specifically for Muslims? Why can't they just tap into what's already within their companies, or they can do both?
That's a great question, and I would say that they could do both, and they should do both. In terms of, I'd say in my experience, what's happened is that most Muslims don't really take benefit of these opportunities in the workplace. There is some sort of hesitation or shyness there, and I can't really put a finger on that as to why. But in terms of, for example, at work, where I was at Centrica for a number of years, I would often get queries, but just because I was very closely associated with the Muslim prayer space there, and coordinating and managing that. Just with that, I had a lot of people who would be very comfortable in asking me, like, how do I sort of go about arranging time for Friday prayers, or simple things such as that, apart from what their daily or their professional challenges are. So there's that is one side of the benefit. Or even on the professional side, having a mentor who sort of you can relate to more, it's a lot easier sometimes to speak to, and also they can give you a different perspective on things. Often, for example, socializing or networking, we sort of associate with, oh, if we, there's going to be alcohol involved, those sort of elements and those sort of challenges. And we sort of restrict ourselves, we hold ourselves back. And I think that's where having someone who's senior, who's sort of going through that journey before you, having them who is sort of a Muslim, a practicing Muslim, they can give you, or give you those tools and tips how to navigate those challenges, which sometimes often aren't really challenges, but barriers that we've created ourselves.
So it covers two aspects, from I understand what you're saying. It covers the professional aspect, generally, which would be applicable to everybody, but then there's the niche aspect of being a professional Muslim as well.
Yeah. I'd say it's, with having a mentor, it provides you focus, it provides you that motivation. And sometimes it's just having someone to be accountable to on an informal basis. Your line manager is going to be more concerned about getting the weekly or monthly challenges done in terms of whatever is to be achieved on the projects. But the mentor, and that line manager could be your mentor as well, I'd say. But having a mentor separate from that can give you that sort of perspective, or sort of, you won't have that you could say requirement for you to remain in that role. They would want you to sort of go beyond that and look at sort of 2, 3, 5 years ahead, which we should be doing. And unfortunately, when we're sort of stuck in our daily routines, we sometimes don't do that.
Okay, excellent. And Syed, organizations such as yours, the Cube Network, like Consortium, you have mentoring outside of the structure of the companies, right? So is there an additional value to having a mentor who's not within who's not a line manager, who's not even working for your firm? Does that give it an extra element?
Absolutely. So I think it's about context and demographics effectively. So whether Muslim or not, having mentors for our careers is a positive thing. It's effectively around belonging. So having a mentor for your career from a work perspective is great. Having multiple mentors is great. But as Abdul Basit said, actually having different elements from an alignment perspective actually helps. So I would actually recommend you have belt and braces. You have both. If you have a work scheme that works for you, then alhamdulillah, great, use it, leverage what you have. If you have other ones in your community, use them. What we actually need, I guess, is depending on which sector an individual is in and their employment situation, they may or may not have the mentor for the type of skill or the type of life skill they're after. Because actually it's fundamentally around that. People look for mentors in different ways, whether it's a guide, a coach, an advisor, a counselor, specific skills, all these kind of different elements. So it's not as though one precludes the other. And I would actually suggest, we have, a mentoring scheme set up, as others do, alhamdulillah, that are there as opportunities. I think wider for the Muslim community, we do need to have a more joint up effort to be able to really do the most for the next generation coming through, to say, if you are interested in a certain area and you're looking for a mentor and you don't happen to have that at work, or you're looking for somebody, whether, the same gender, the same race, to face certain challenges that you have in your space, just to say, look, I can deliver, but I'm me, and there's certain aspects of me that, are my elements of belonging. That's what they cling on to. So
interesting, just to pick up on that point you mentioned about the generational divide.
Yeah.
So, my generation, your generation, we didn't really have the mentors in place because the generation before us maybe hadn't reached the upper echelons of their professional careers, or broad enough career choices, and that's something that we're going to get onto later on. And so maybe we didn't have the option to have those mentors. Do you think that's true, or is that just my
absolutely? I agree. Well, I'd say we didn't have visible mentors who were Muslims there. So the mentors were there from a career perspective, our colleagues to reach out to, our stakeholders, etc. But when it came to that additional element, how do I rise in my career without, if I'm in a field, having to sponsor drinks for my team, and some other kind of practical elements in terms of, how do I deliver in a way that's comfortable for me? And alhamdulillah, one of the things we've actually seen, I think, out this year, the pandemic, is a softer change in society, and them actually understanding that we have to behave in ways that are more inclusive of each other, more conscious of each other, and actually, with all different things, ethical. And that's, where our religion comes into it. And I think that generational change, all of those factors, alhamdulillah, helped us so far now. And with the next demographics, we've got more and more youngsters, inshallah, qualifying. I think we have more Muslims graduates coming through than the average population of Muslims in the UK.
Yeah.
And so the numbers are only going to increase. And that's the kind of direction that we're looking at.
And Marwa, so as Said said, it's not just the generational side of things. That is a factor, but also we've got more people coming through. There's a greater understanding, or maybe not greater understanding, but certainly a greater interest in Islam and a greater cognizance of Islam and practicing Muslims within the professional environment. How's that changed things?
It changed things in a way where people are more curious now. So there is an opportunity in a lot of workplaces now where people want to learn more. There's a lot more curiosity that we can leverage that Muslim professionals can leverage to their advantage in a way where we can answer questions, create spaces to answer some of the curiosities that are coming up, or proactively talk about different ways of doing the work. There's a lot of hype around the new ways of working, the future of work. And a lot of this moves away from what we call the white dominant ways of working that in a lot of cases don't necessarily align with our culture, with our ways of doing, and so on. So leveraging this opportunity to introduce different ways of working that maybe religiously, culturally are more fitting and aligned with our own values as Muslims.
And how much of that do you think is, if I'm a little bit cynical here, how much of that is genuine curiosity and how much is box ticking?
I think there's both, and the opportunity here is how do you approach it? If we approach it with cynicism, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. I'd like to think that if you approach things with cynicism, you're going to find doubtful people, and then if you approach it with positivity, people in many of the cases can't help but shift or create a shift in their perspective. So even with cynical people, I think when they learn more, when they understand better, there is a sense of shared humanity, I think, that happens. Like they get to, a lot of what I've seen in my experience in organizations, that a lot of the biases that take place or the isolation that happens to some of the Muslim professionals is that others don't know us. They don't know how do we operate. They don't know who we are. We're not in social events. We're not in any physical interaction and so on. We're very withdrawn in the workplace. So now if we proactively create spaces for people to get to know us, our shared humanity will prevail and empathy will prevail. Good things, I guess.
Yeah, no, I would echo that. I would completely agree. I mean, even if people are doing it out of a sense of ticking a box, we should still take advantage of that. We should still leverage that and use it as an opportunity to further ourselves, further our community, but also just to explain Islam as well, right? It's an opportunity for us to do that. You're listening to the Midday magazine. I'm Burhan, and we are talking about Muslim professional mentoring and networking and careers. We are live streaming on Facebook and YouTube, and you can join us in the studio with your calls, texts, and WhatsApp on 077 614 60614. 077 614 60614. We had a question in, and you can, like I said, use that number to join us. Abdul Basit, I'm going to throw this one to you. How much experience do you need before you can become a mentor? Do you have to have a certain level of training or support when you start mentoring? It's a good question.
Well, that question should be directed to Marwa, but I'd say in terms of from a personal perspective, I personally think that has something that they can sort of bring to the table. From a professional perspective, a number of years, being in middle management, I would say would be a good place to sort of start. But then again, it's sometimes you have friends in your circle who you could sort of leverage or speak to and seek advice from.
Yeah.
In terms of the program that we've had, we sort of stipulated, Marwa, if I'm correct, about I think 5 to 7 years experience for them to be on the program to mentor junior professionals. But then again, if someone is really keen that they want to sort of, trained to become a mentor, for example, if they're already in the teaching background, then they've already had some of that training. Then what we also do is we provide that support to them to make sure they have all the tools and tips, or techniques, I should say, for them to be effective in mentoring whoever they are. And often a lot of the time with mentees is that they sort of know what they want to do. It's just that they want that sort of someone to bounce off ideas with and someone to listen to them.
Yeah. Marwa, do you want to just pick up on that as the mentoring lead?
Yeah. I'm going to still say its word at the beginning around context. Like, it really depends on the context, what type of mentoring you're doing. I mean, we see a lot of the times now in the workplace reverse mentoring, where younger professionals that are tech savvy are mentoring older professionals. So it really depends what type of mentoring it is. I would agree with Abdul Basit that middle management is usually a good space to start becoming mentoring, giving back to the community and so on. But even as a young professional, you could offer mentoring to college students, or reverse mentoring, as I said, in tech stuff, in social media, things that most executives, I guess, are not very, very savvy at.
So on that point, it doesn't sound like there's necessarily a particular set of criteria, a fixed set of criteria. It really depends on what the person is looking for in a mentor, right?
I would say actually that there are some general things we look for. So in terms of maturing mentoring schemes, both in vetting, who's going to be a mentee to make sure that they've got the kind of right approach, we should be looking at the same from mentors. So we want somebody who's supportive. We want somebody who can actually dedicate that time. So, it's an element of them giving from themselves. Why? Because they want to help others climb that ladder. And some of, in rare cases, we have found that actually people want to give that mentoring, but, it's being able to genuinely give that time, to have that. I think emotional intelligence is really key. But it's not just to say, look, this is what worked for me. This is what works for me. It's having that wisdom and understanding, being able to impart that with an element of dispassionate side to say, look, this is my view and why, but also this is what I think works and I've seen others work, and be able to advise from that perspective. And so, say active listening, and to be comfortable being constructive. And that's a little bit of a skill as well. Not everyone can, as a junior, can always be as diplomatic as they need to be to that. But alhamdulillah, that doesn't seem to be an issue. Those who've actually realize from a religious perspective, why am I here? What can I do? I can give back even with my skills and knowledge in some ways. Generally have that approach to go, okay, if I'm going to give back, this is how I'm going to give back. So alhamdulillah, I think the Islamic element takes care of that. Can I just pick up on one point? You did mention about as mentors, as mentees, that that's a way of kind of demonstrating in Islam, I'd say. I wouldn't say from a corporate perspective, from a work perspective, as Muslim employees, as employees of any faith. So proselytizing, actually spreading your faith, is a separate element to actually just practicing your faith. So whilst we talk about having Muslim employees and mentoring schemes, it's really about supporting and increasing the belonging rather than any kind of tacit kind of da'wah as such.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a good distinction. It's an important distinction to make. The other aspect I was going to mention about mentoring, I don't know if you feel the same in terms of who makes a good mentor, is making sure that the gap between you isn't too great. So for instance, you talked about middle management. So if somebody's at the early stages of their career and somebody is very senior, maybe at a partner level or a director level, would that make a difference? Can somebody who's at a partner or director level still remember what it's like to be at the beginning of their career?
If I can answer that one. So I've definitely seen it work. At Barclays Bank, for example, there was it wasn't a Muslim one, but it was, I think, for their Black Heritage scheme, a young chap, an apprentice, I believe, so not even a graduate, set up a mentoring scheme right at board level. And it's got reverse mentoring that Marwa mentioned earlier. The advantage being, with mentoring, as with most of these things, we're looking at win-win situations. Somebody young gets some real wisdom, right? Like we look to our grandparents often for, our uncles and aunts, that kind of real from the top kind of years of wisdom. And actually, those at the top don't necessarily have that exposure culturally, understanding, even with the youth generation. And what we often find where you've got a big age gap is the mentors themselves actually say, this helps me relate more when I'm going to schools, colleges, talking to my own kids, grandkids, and the next generation. Because mentoring, our entire scheme, everything we do, just like a corporate element, is about sustainability. And sustainability is about the next generation as well. So the gap isn't to worry about. It depends, again, contextually, what are you looking for? If you're looking to say, what do I need to just move to that next step? Then you probably don't need the most senior person in the firm in that specialist area. If you're looking for a career advice, then alhamdulillah, go for it.
That's a good point. And just before we move on to networking as our next kind of subtopic, just go back to Mauro just for a second. Is there any kind of course or qualification that we can point listeners to in terms of mentoring and coaching? And if there isn't, do you think there should be? And is there a gap in the market for someone to create one?
There is plenty of courses around mentorship that people can do. There's like plenty online. There's plenty.
Like, are there qualifications that people can do?
Yeah, certifications and that kind of thing. So there is plenty out there. I mean, even within the Muslim networks in consortium, for example, we have an orientation for our mentors where we take them through a session about expectations, about what kind of role they're playing, what kind of conversations. We even have a really specific structure on like some of the thoughts. We call it like a food for thought, leadership thoughts around like what kind of mindsets do we want to nurture within our mentees and so on. So there's a lot out there. I would invite people to reach out to Saeed or Abdul Basit or myself, and we would be more than happy to sort of direct them into these spaces.
Excellent. Thank you for that. If we just kind of use that to segue into networking, which I guess is the next step on from mentoring. It's part of the same family, but it's once you're comfortable within a particular environment, I suppose. How do the two things relate, Abdul Basit, the mentoring and the networking? Are they complementary skills?
From a networking perspective, one of my favorite sayings is "be interested to be interesting." And I've sort of seen it practically work for myself in the sense that even sort of going into work in the morning, or right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, even sort of picking up the phone, sending a text message to your colleagues and stuff, there's huge value in that. And I've sort of seen the results for myself personally. I'm noticed, and all I've done is I'll say good morning, how are you, or when we're having coffee, what's going on, and showing interest beyond just the work sort of objectives or motives that that we or I individually have. From that perspective, it's been it's hugely important to sort of network. From a complementary perspective, I'd say yes, definitely. I've seen one of the mentors that we have on our current program right now. He's mentoring again. It was a senior mentor. Director level mentoring again someone who's in senior management as well, but they were wanting to break through board level to director level, and they wanted someone to bounce off. But what they've been able to do is sort of give them more connections, more sort of which they perhaps didn't have in their own network, and from that perspective, mentoring can sort of open up your network as well.
And networking as a career advancement tool, we know that it does work, and we know that it is an important part of that. But is it for, it's not necessarily for everybody, is it? Because it really depends on your personality type.
I can go for that since I'm an introvert, so networking does not come naturally for me at all. But I think you can, like anything, again, and stealing Said's word, context. I think customizing what networking for you, so I don't go to every single event, I don't go to every interaction, but I identify for myself what I think is important to do. Who are the connections, the people that I want to make sure I connect with and keep in touch with. When sort of what organizations do I want to get to learn about? So before I volunteered for consortium, I looked it up actually. I looked different organizations and then got in touch with Abdul Basit and so on. So I would say, I actually think networking is so important for any professional. especially if for Muslim professionals that are just entering now the professional workspace and so on. I would just really encourage everyone to, even if you're an introvert like myself, identify who are the people, what are the communities that you want to be part of, and identify some of the events. You don't have to go to all 10, go to 2 that are important and so on.
And talking about context, we have another question come in, and Sayed, I'm going to throw this one to you. How can you practically get ahead in a career when most of the friendships and future plans in a department are discussed informally in social environments which you can't access?
So that's one that often comes up in career advice elements, where we see, even without mentoring, where you have that engagement with seniors. So how do we do this? I think really it is a careful approach of actually establishing that relationship and dialogue. You'll see that there are some, alhamdulillah, who depends on the field again, but they've managed to succeed without having to compromise on their values. They establish that relationship, and it's not about imposing themselves or their beliefs, but to establish that norm. If they're true to themselves and ultimately they're performing, the usual piece of advice for mentoring, whether it's Muslim mentoring or otherwise, and for career advancement, is be good at your job, right? That's number one, right? So if we look at, you know, our Islamic values, and you talk about networking, it's a case of doing everything by intention, and you know, and what are our intentions in doing our work, and being the best that we can be at various things. Even from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his lifetime, he was an exemplary employee first and foremost before becoming a prophet, right? And so we should try to apply that ourselves, and in that in itself, we gain that respect of our colleagues. You will see with non-Muslim colleagues, with Muslim colleagues, you have people who are different circumstances, that they have to finish at a certain time because they've got responsibilities with family. They can only start at a certain time. They're not attending social events either, but they manage to progress because people respect them. So to gain that respect, I think it is a case of being good at what you do, is the first must. The second one is tactics you can have. So to say, well, I can't necessarily join you to go down to the pub or to a drink or bar afterwards, is one side of it. So, well, why don't you arrange a lunch element? It is, you know, it's making up for it in different ways, you know, in terms of, it's not about treats for the team necessarily, but having that relationship. Are you having a coffee or a tea, obviously outside the Ramadan or when you're not fasting, with those that you want to? Do you have that one-to-one relationship with them? Are you, you know, do you have that personal relationship to any degree with them to actually just talk to them? It doesn't just have to be, oh, I can only talk about personal things, you know, just out of the 9 to 5. There's 4 minutes here and there. Check how people are, be genuine in that. And I think that all together as part of you being you at work will help them recognize when you want that conversation, say, I'd like to move in this direction, that they're more serious about that. It's not just leaving it till the quarterly or annual review.
Sure. Yeah. But I mean, the reality is, I may go back to Abdul Basir for this one. The reality is with networking, there is a lot of peer pressure. And so especially for our community, especially when there are things which are culturally contradictory, how would you advise certainly the younger professionals who are starting out in their networking to deal with that kind of peer pressure?
So one of the things which I did was I proposed a social committee, obviously before these challenges that, you know, I'm not going to go to the pub to socialize and so forth. But then again, there were things that, you know, everyone enjoys. They enjoy sports, for example. They enjoy going to the theatre. So what I did was propose you know, having a social committee at work, and I chaired it a number of times. We had a budget allocated to us, and based on that, we would sort of, you know, organize, you know, rounders games, and then, you know, trips to the theatre, and even the social lunches. And that's where, you know, it was, you know, the ones, you know, that I had sort of, you know, control or you know, responsibility for, I could arrange them as I wanted. And rounders, for example, was a super hit. You know, have, you know, tennis or go to the nets for cricket or whatever. There's loads of opportunities there. And the peer pressure element, fortunately, I've not felt it, because as I said, you're delivering, you know, what your responsibilities are. Don't let your guard down there. And then again, you know, do the basic things right, show interest in others, everyone around you, in your team, you know, build those relationships beyond just, you know, the work. You've got to be interested in people genuinely, and you will see how people will recognize you.
And Marwa, I guess there'd be some specific challenges around being a woman as well. Maybe you could talk to that.
I actually think there's similar challenges add to it being a woman. So not only that I can't go to the pub, sometimes I can't. I think in some contexts I wouldn't go out alone with a male friend, for example, for lunch or coffee or so on. And I think, again, just similar to what my colleagues here in the panel have mentioned, is just creating the context where you're comfortable being part of. So creating these group lunches, we have brown bag lunches. We do this thing in our work where we do brown bag lunches. So we all go to lunch together and talk about different things. Sports is somewhere where we can do that. Creating women communities too is actually a powerful thing. I mean, women in the workplace face so many challenges anyways, whichever background you come from. So creating a women community where it is based on supporting each other and solidarity and so on is another venue or entry point to socialization and just creating stronger bonds and relationships with colleagues in the workplace. One thing that I do want to mention, a lot of the times we look at areas that we don't have. So we look at places where we can't access or conversations that we can't be part of. And really, as someone who has spent most of my career in organizations helping build organizational cultures, my invitation is actually look at spaces that you are currently involved in, spaces that you are currently invited in, and leverage those to expand your relationships, expand your bonds, expand your influence, actually, and impact.
Oh, yeah, and like Abdul Basit said, it is about showing an interest and having a genuine interest in people, because you're not going to be able to please everybody, right? There's always going to be people within your peer pressure group who will judge you. There will be people within the Muslim community who will judge you. For some people, you'll be too liberal. Some people, you'll be too strict, right? Yeah. Some people will say to Abdul Basit, well, no, why is Marwa playing rounders, right? Yeah. And other people will say, on the other hand, you know, the people on the other end of the spectrum will say, well, why won't Marwa go somewhere and have a drink with a male? So you can't please everybody, and you never will, right? So you go for the 80% in the middle. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I add just one more thing to
Go
that
ahead.
point? So you asked about the skills, and you know, to the question we received. One of the things we often get asked is about, and one of the things we often see where you have mentors not complaining but observing kind of the new cohorts and the kind of younger professionals, is demographically what we often see is people form cliques. They're used to that because of where they've come from. So they kind of stick to their own kind, and that doesn't always help them from a work perspective. And whether it's mentoring, whether it's progression at work, some of it can be an element of you know, that's what you're used to, because actually that level of integration isn't something that we're necessarily taught at school. You know, it happens at university, and it's thrust upon us at work in many ways. It's actually, you have this feedback where people talk about who's being hired, who's being progressed, and they have this codified behavior, which is very difficult to touch. And this is where social mobility comes into it, where actually you have these skills around relating to others. And the reality is it isn't just that they're going down to the bar and socializing. It's that they're of a different subculture to you, Muslim or not, right? And in many cases. And that can be a barrier in itself. So again, we often hear that those who are potential mentees will say, the conversation I had, there's lots of light bulb moments for them, because their non-Muslim colleagues or their non-Asian colleagues or their non-African colleagues are kind of saying things to them that are norms to them that they just weren't aware of until that point. And then it's just, you know, being able to improve your skills to have that dialogue with them and build those relationships that Marwa and Abdul Basit were talking about.
Very good. Thank you for that. I just wanted to move the conversation on a little bit to being a Muslim in the workplace and expectations, just because we have about 15 minutes left. I want to try and touch on a couple of other points. You're listening to the Midday magazine. We're talking about Muslim mentoring, networking, and professional life on ramadanradio.org. Please do join us, ask your questions, make some comments. It's 077 614 60614. Abdul Basit, in terms of what people should expect once they enter the professional life in an office environment or in any kind of professional environment, I think that the reality for Muslims in the workplace has changed a lot in the last generation or so, certainly in the last 15 years. What changes have you observed, and what do you think a young professional going into work, say from September on their grad scheme, should expect?
I personally feel it's when I started, for example, I remember the offices that I worked in, there was hardly a prayer space, for example. And that was initially quite a challenge. It's, you know, how do I sort of navigate those?
Hands
Nowadays,
up,
there
who's prayed
isn't that.
underneath the stairwell?
I've prayed in first aid rooms, so name it, in storerooms, etc. But alhamdulillah, nowadays I'd say there's a lot more, there's more openness around, ethnic diversity and the backgrounds that you come from. There was this whole thing that you can take your whole self to work a number of years ago. And again, it's from a Muslim perspective. I think that's what we've got to be comfortable with who we are, and we got to sort of show others that it's okay. It doesn't matter. The key thing, as Saeed said, is to make sure that you deliver in in whatever your responsibilities are. I remember it's early on. It's very early on in my career. I would I've just got to go for a bit to say my prayers, and my manager replied back to me. He goes, "You don't need to tell me that." It's okay. You just do what you have to do. It was mainly, all his concern was, and I've said it a few times, is delivering on what was required. And as long as you're good with that, and again, have that relationship otherwise with beyond work, I'd say that really makes it easy. So going into work in September, I'd say, be comfortable to ask questions. Don't sort of feel shy in that. Sometimes we hold back. And again, another example I'd give is, in the prayer room, for example, again, relating it to prayer, for a number of years, we didn't have a divider. And so every time the sisters would come and brothers would be praying, they would have to wait outside. And sometimes in winters, for example, very short days, they're waiting for, 5, 10, 15 minutes. And then, I've got to go back. I've got another meeting. And, then they miss their prayer. We were sitting on that, okay, and should we ask to raise funds and just buy a divider and so forth? And once, I just got fed up and I was like, I picked up the phone, spoke to HR, I said, we need a divider in the prayer room. Could you help us? Within 2 hours, we had that. So it's, a very simple example. Sometimes the challenges that you have in your head don't really exist. Be open, just ask questions. Share your concerns with your management, your line manager, and I'm more than sure they'd be more than happy to help.
I would echo that. And I would say that sometimes we feel that going into a work environment as a Muslims, we have lots of barriers and lots of challenges, but actually it's not that many. It's 90% of the time you're very much just like the rest of your colleagues. And there's a few areas, and we've mentioned them, and the same things always come up. It's the prayer room and it's going for drinks. And there's a few things which are peripheral to that, but really it's, the challenges are not overwhelming, and I don't think we should see it as a barrier. But I suppose, Marwa, for people entering the workplace or who are in the workplace now, there is an element where you can be too demanding as well, right? So you have to remember that you are in a professional environment, and there has to be accommodation on both sides.
I agree. There has to be accommodation on both sides. I would say the key word here is curiosity. So I think asking questions is also always a good thing, and just like approaching and having conversations is really important for any professional, to be honest, but specifically for Muslim professionals, it's important. So coming in without judgment. So a lot of the times when we have needs and we have these limiting beliefs around these needs, we start our ask questions with implicit judgments or blaming or other unnecessary or unhelpful attitudes and mindsets. So what I encourage professionals to do is to continue to ask questions and be curious, however, without judgment, shame, blame. Be curious about why are we doing things this way? Why are we making these decisions? Can we shift? Is this an open door to shift and do things differently, and so on? So I think continuing to ask questions, even if many, is a good thing. However, how you ask the question is very, very important, in the mindset that you're coming with.
Okay, and just going to the questions, which is in the context of this discussion, Saeed. Somebody has asked, do you feel that those who go for drinks still have an advantage despite other events being set up for non-drinkers? I suppose in the context of what we're talking about, yes, people can accommodate Muslims, and we can accommodate ourselves as well. But at the end of the day, if you are going to the prayer room, or if you do take Friday lunch, a slightly extended Friday lunch, and you don't go for drinks, aren't you still at a disadvantage? Will people still not perceive you as being othered?
I guess it depends if you're talking about the disadvantage for you as an individual or disadvantage from a career perspective, because for us as believers, ultimately that disadvantage doesn't matter, right? In terms of we're doing the right thing and we're accountable for the way in which we do it. So, simply in terms of, are you disadvantaged from an Islamic perspective? No. Are you disadvantaged from a career perspective? You're not necessarily. Often that may be what you see and perceive to say, well, actually that they're progressing because they're working the network that they have in a certain way. But that doesn't mean that that's something you should actually aspire to emulate in some way. I think the challenges that we have, and the common challenges, and just joining this up from a network perspective, is why we need the mentoring is that actually some of us have, mashallah, large networks, and others just don't have any that avenue to which to go to, right? So if we're talking about mentoring or advice or introduction, one of the people who got introduced to me from an informal mentoring perspective, and then I introduced him to others, was actually through the mosque. They had an interest in a specialist area.
Right.
Said, oh, they happened to know that I worked in that area. So they gave me a call and ring me up. And that to me should be the ultimate kind of strategic model, right? That actually, if you have an interest in anything and you don't know somebody who's got that interest, or you want to progress in that, or you're starting that area and you don't know others in that space, who do you turn to? And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to facilitate joining that network into that mentoring to say you have avenues to get that advice. And I think that's a real challenge for the community.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that's the value that your organizations bring. So you've grouped together particular Muslim professionals, and you've created an avenue for people to access that advice, that mentoring, the networking, and all these issues which we've been talking about today can then be explored and hopefully answered in a more comprehensive way using various different sources, people who've come from different backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, different professional backgrounds. But it's not all professions have the luxury of having those networks. There are still some professions which are, kind of, and this is the last area of topic that we're going to discuss, are still kind of behind. How can we address that? How can we encourage people to go into these, as I've described it, non-traditional careers? Abdul Basit, do you want to have a crack at that?
I guess it's when we're looking at, even like when we did the media training program, it's we were looking for specialists in particular, in different areas, because whether it's engineering, whether it's finance, whether it's law, it's decisions are sort of being made, or strategies and policies are being devised which sort of impact us Muslims. So we feel, for talking about it's one of the important things that we want to sort of have British Muslims at the forefront in UK life. We want to have a seat at the table. We don't want decisions being completely made on our behalf.
Exactly.
We've got to have a voice, and I think that's where it's important that we have someone. Well, we've got to be in every whether it's arts, whether it's business, whether it's healthcare, or the financial roles that we more sort of are inclined to. We've got to look just beyond, for example, whether this is going to be, if I'm going to investment banking, then I can sort of earn X. Other careers, yes, perhaps may not be providing as much, but looking at teaching, that's very important as well. So we've got to be able to have Muslims who are leaders in their professions, and that includes the whole, whatever profession that may be, so we can influence policy. We are growing as a population in the UK, and I think that's where it's really important that we are able, from our local councils right to the government level, where there's education, that we've got to be involved, and we've got to be involved at every level. And I think that's where we have people, individuals in pockets, but we don't sort of see them. We see them at the lower sort of levels, at junior and sort of middle level, and then at senior management, there's hardly anyone. What's going on? What are we doing there? And I think that's where we've got to try and sort of utilize those senior professionals, senior members in our community. They want to give back, and sometimes they don't have those opportunities, and that's where the likes of ourselves, consortium, Cube Network, we try and facilitate that. We want to give opportunity to senior professionals to support the junior ones to be able to get to those levels, to that management and decision making roles, inshallah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say just bouncing this back to you as well. Both Consortium and Cuba are is a network of networks, right? Of professional networks, if I've understood it correctly. Are there particular areas of professional life which you find are not covered at the moment, and are there particular gaps which sort of concern you that actually we're not represented at all over here?
So if I explain, I don't think we have as such. So Consortium is a network of networks, and we have, alhamdulillah, I think sort of 13 or so main networks, including doctors and engineers and lawyers, and and Cube itself is a network of Muslim employee networks. But
Okay.
we have areas of, our diversity as such is limited because there aren't huge numbers of Muslims in certain professions who are established a certain way, but it doesn't mean we can't reach out to them. So, for example, we had a request for somebody who's interested in marketing or in architecture, etc. So as far as we're aware, at the moment, there isn't a Muslim architects network for us to work with. But we have those either through our personal connections, our networks, people have heard that 6 degrees of separation. Alhamdulillah, I think, between just us on the call, actually, you've got connections potentially to so many people, pretty much everyone on the planet. Far fewer than that 6 degrees, actually, if through some key nodes. So if somebody reaches out and they are interested in areas which don't have, as say, traditionally huge numbers, it doesn't mean we can't make those introductions. And it may not be for full mentoring, it may be for advice and counseling, but we have that opportunity to say whether it's somebody wants to be an astronaut, or whether somebody wants to go into marketing or architecture, or cycling, or anything that's halal and absolutely positive. We'd encourage them. Art as well, it's an area that traditionally our communities never promoted.
Absolutely.
Have those connections. Say you want to go into photography, meet a professional photographer. There's sound advice around what you can do holistically for your life, but also around professional skills.
And Mauro, do these, just for I know we're a London-based radio station, but are these networks and these discussions, are they at the moment, are they quite London-centric, or are they taking place throughout the country? And even wider than that, I mean, when you're networking professionally, the world's become such a small place. Do these networks now expand internationally as well?
So there are a lot of international Muslim networks that you can easily access online right now. For both of our networks right now, it's, yes, London-centric predominantly. However, because of the pandemic, we've noticed that we've been, and like the online nature, we've had, it eased the access of other areas within the UK, for example, to reach out and have discussions around the mentorship. And we've had interest for people replicating some of these programs in their context and so on. So I think it is growing, the interest, because the gap exists. And alhamdulillah, we have a lot of people who want to give back to the community, who want to strengthen our community and so on. So a lot of people are thinking about ways to bring these programs and this work to their own communities or contexts within different
we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to do a couple of announcements, if you guys don't mind, and then I'll come back to you for final thoughts, and we'll wrap up. So you're listening to the Midday Magazine. We have, like I said, about 3-4 minutes left. The next program after the Dhuhr Adhan will be the Power of Nlp. What is it? Why do you need it? And how can it impact your life, with Mubashir Latif? So please do stay tuned for that. And our next show, which will be inshallah our final show for this Ramadan, which will be on Sunday at midday, because it's the Midday Magazine. So and we'll be talking to a couple of guests on Sunday who have been educated in the Islamic sciences, one in this country and one in Al-Azhar, and we'll be discussing what that means. Who can go into that? Why do people go in for that kind of academic learning? What is the difference between a imam and a sheikh and a scholar and a mujtahid and a faqih and a mufti? If there is a difference, how can you become one? And can you be one? Can you be an imam but also have a regular career at the same time? So we'll be demystifying all of these kind of things on Sunday's show, inshallah. So please do join us then. So final thoughts on mentoring from Marwa, networking from Abdul Basit, and Muslim professional workplace from Sayed. So Mara, mentoring, final thoughts, please.
I think my final thought is that I really truly encourage all professionals to reach out to organizations such as Consortium and Cube to have access to mentorship program. It's an opportunity that you could leverage to grow your career, progress, have new mindsets, and grow your leadership.
Thank you. Abdul Basit.
I'm going to invite everyone to visit our website, consortiumdb.org. You can find information on our networks there. And again, expand your networks, and inshallah, it'll open opportunities for you, whatever you're looking for, I'd say. So there's a lot of value there, inshallah.
Agreed. Sayed.
I would say be your true self at work. I know it's not about being a cliche, but if you are true to your values from an Islamic perspective, inshallah, that will work out. Seek mentorship. And like Abdul Basit, I'll shamelessly say, please do look at Cube Network on our Instagram, on our Facebook page, on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. Connect, because if you're looking for a mentor, if you're looking even for any advice or help and assistance, alhamdulillah, we've been of help to others in the past, and inshallah look to be in the future.
Alhamdulillah. No shame at all. I think it's good to do that. It's good to get in touch with people. I mean, that's what networking is all about. We can't talk about networking and then not try to network. There'll be a contradiction. So Jazakallah khair to all three of you. It's been a fascinating discussion. Really enjoyed it. I hope you have enjoyed it as well. And I hope you'll stay tuned for the next show. And please do join us again on Sunday at midday for the Midday magazine. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam. Barakallahu fi.